I'm happy to help you turn that detailed outline into a compelling, professional voiceover script for YouTube. I'll adopt the voice of Alex, the husband, telling this unbelievable story about his wife, Evelyn. I have generated the script in 2 continuous parts, ensuring the required length, conversational U.S. English style, and dramatic escalation. Fun mo. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of quiet, misty morning you dream about when you're stuck fighting traffic on a Tuesday. We were up at our place, the Redwood Lodge, nestled deep in Oak Haven Ridge. I was making coffee, the good stuff, single origin, and Evelyn was at the sink, still brushing her teeth, toothpaste foam gathered at the corners of her mouth, when her work phone went off. It wasn't a ring, either. It was that flat, urgent dispatch tone. She wiped her hands, squinted at the screen, and hit speakerphone. "Ma'am, we have a priority 911 report that a female named Evelyn Carver is unlawfully occupying a residential property at Oak Haven Ridge. The complainant is requesting immediate removal by law enforcement." Evelyn slowly, and I mean slowly, turned her head toward me, still holding the toothbrush. Her eyes were huge, partially from disbelief, partially from sheer amusement. She rinsed the foam away, leaned closer to the sink, and murmured, "Honey, apparently I'm illegally living in my own house." I was still half asleep, but that was my alarm clock right there. I knew instantly. One person, and only one person in this entire Little Mountain community, had the entitlement and the sheer audacity to weaponize the emergency services like that: Patrice Dubois, the HOA president, the self-appointed queen of the Ridge. And what she didn't know, what she had no idea about, was that she had just called the state police on the woman who runs the state police. If you've never seen your spouse, your calm, collected, borderline legendary spouse, get falsely reported to 911 before they've had their first sip of coffee, let me tell you, it's a special kind of surreal. But to understand why that moment wasn't a shock, you have to rewind 3 days. Because Oak Haven wasn't a battlefield that morning. The match had already been struck. Patrice just finally decided to throw it on a pile of gasoline. We bought the Redwood Lodge after Evelyn's promotion. She became the deputy director of the State Bureau of Investigation. A huge title, a huge paycheck, and a corresponding amount of stress that would buckle a normal person. The lodge was supposed to be our peace. Tall pines, cool air, a deck big enough for 2 rocking chairs, and absolutely zero responsibility. We drove up humming old R&B songs, ready to reset our nervous systems. We didn't even get the groceries inside before the trouble started. Evelyn was unloading the last bag, whistling some cheesy tune, when the crunch of gravel made us both look up. A massive, snow-white Audi Q8 eased itself into our dirt driveway, like it was the Mayflower landing at Plymouth Rock. The door opened, and out stepped Patrice. Perfume thick enough to choke a bear, sunglasses that swallowed half her face, and a tailored linen jacket that screamed, "I own 2 different hedge funds." She carried a clipboard the way a Roman centurion carried a sword, with intent. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She marched straight past us and began walking the perimeter of the cabin, scribbling notes like she was an appraiser who'd already decided everything was worthless. Evelyn, being the professional she is, tried to be civil. "Hi there, can we help you?" Patrice didn't stop writing. "Unauthorized activity on this parcel. Need to confirm status. Are you renters?" Evelyn set down the box of wine, wiped her hands on her jeans, and said, "No, we own this place." Patrice finally looked up, squinting like she just smelled a bad lie. "I don't recognize you." I stepped beside Evelyn. "We closed last spring. I'm Alex. This is my wife, Evelyn." Patrice's eyebrows disappeared under her perfectly coiffed hairline. "I'm the HOA president," she announced, as if waiting for us to genuflect. "We require formal occupancy notices submitted through the community portal. Did you submit one?" Now, about that portal. It was a broken site built on some outdated platform from the early 2000s. The login form crashed if you looked at it too hard. Half the pages were titled Draft Copy for Final. This was the system Patrice spoke of like it was the launch sequence for a SpaceX mission. Evelyn kept her smile polite. We weren't informed that was required for owners. Patrice clicked her pen aggressively. Regardless, I don't see your name on the ownership record. And that's when it hit me. I'd purchased the lodge under my LLC. Made the tax situation cleaner, the lawyer said. My name was on the deed, Evelyn's wasn't. It was a purely bureaucratic financial choice. But to Patrice, it wasn't a loophole. It was ammunition. Her lips curled into something truly ugly. She produced a slip of paper, printed, "God help us," in Comic Sans. This is a warning. You must vacate until your residency can be verified. Evelyn took the slip, read it for a beat, and handed it back without emotion. No thanks. I don't take orders from you. Patrice looked genuinely offended that the sun hadn't darkened in response. From that moment on, the war was declared. The next morning, we got a note about violating the natural debris limit, which apparently meant 3 small pine cones had fallen during the night. Then came the note about excessive porch occupancy. Yes, she invented the term. It was just Evelyn drinking tea on the porch swing, but according to Patrice, we were over-occupying our own outdoor space. The masterpiece, though, arrived 2 days later. A formal, typewritten complaint accusing Evelyn of unauthorized cohabitation, sealed with packing tape and what looked disturbingly like a lipstick imprint. Evelyn read it aloud in a deadpan voice. The unidentified female on premises must depart within 48 hours or face removal via local enforcement. I was laughing so hard I almost cried. Evelyn wasn't. This woman won't stop, she said quietly. She's going to push until she feels powerful. She was right. Patrice wasn't the type to reflect. She was the type to double down until she either won or metaphorically set the whole neighborhood on fire. By the time she made the 911 call that Saturday morning, we were more amused than shocked. Annoyed, definitely. But surprised? Not even close. We just didn't know how spectacularly her little crusade was about to backfire. When the 2 patrol cars finally rolled up our dirt road, I was standing at the kitchen window, watching the blue lights flicker through the trees like confused fireflies. 2 officers stepped out slowly, treating the lodge like it was a suspicious raccoon, not a supposed home invader. Evelyn opened the door before they even knocked. She stepped into the doorway, still in her pajamas, with the kind of steady, measured calm that scares people more than shouting ever could. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said. "I understand you're here to remove me from my own cabin." The younger officer blinked like his brain had just blue-screened. "Ma'am, we received a 911 report claiming a trespass in progress. The complainant identified you by name, Evelyn Carver." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "And yet here I am, making breakfast." They fumbled for a safe phrase. "May we come in?" "Of course." She gestured them inside like she was hosting a brunch. I stayed near the hallway, watching these 2 poor guys struggle to reconcile the ridiculous call with the very normal, messy cabin they were standing in. Nothing looked remotely criminal, just a half-sliced apple, some fishing rods, and a coffee machine. The younger officer flipped to a second page on his notepad. "The complainant stated that you refused to vacate when told you were not an authorized occupant." Evelyn let out a soft breath, just enough to signal annoyance. "Officer, I am the co-owner of this property in every meaningful sense except for a paperwork technicality. My husband purchased the cabin under an LLC. I live here, I pay for it, and I certainly didn't break in." The older officer, already suspecting HOA nonsense, tried to be gentle. "Do you have proof of affiliation with the owner?" Without missing a beat, Evelyn picked up her phone from the counter. "Here's our marriage certificate. Here's the LLC listing with my name as co-executive." She swiped again. "And here is my state ID." The younger officer leaned in, then stopped, squinted, and looked back at Evelyn. "Ma'am, I just want to confirm something. Your name is Evelyn Carver." "Yes," she said. He swallowed. "As in, Deputy Director Evelyn Carver." Evelyn gave a polite nod. The 2 officers straightened so fast, I could almost hear their spines snap into alignment. The older one removed his hat. The younger one looked like he might spontaneously combust from embarrassment. "Deputy Director, ma'am," he said shakily. "We didn't realize. We weren't informed." Evelyn held up a hand. "Relax. You're doing your job, and I appreciate that you responded professionally. But I want something very clear on record. She picked up the remote and tapped the security feed onto the TV. Grainy footage appeared, Patrice creeping around our recycling bin like she was gathering intel for a garbage-based sting operation. Then another clip, Patrice with a tape measure stretching it across our firewood stack. And another, Patrice stepping onto the porch uninvited, measuring the distance between the welcome mat and the door frame. The older officer let out a long, tired sigh. That's trespassing and harassment and misuse of emergency services if she called 911 claiming I was an intruder, Evelyn finished. Which is exactly what she did. She said you were refusing to leave the property, the young one admitted. Evelyn crossed her arms. I was refusing to leave my breakfast. When they left, they apologized 3 separate times. They even offered extra patrols, which Evelyn politely declined. I don't need protection, she said. I need documentation. I leaned against the door after they left. Well, that went better than expected. Evelyn gave a humorless little smile. Patrice thinks this is a power struggle between her and a woman she believes doesn't belong here. She doesn't understand that she just put herself on a collision course with the actual law. If you've ever lived under an HOA tyrant, you know the truth. Once a Karen, or in our case a Patrice, feels embarrassed, she doesn't retreat, she reloads. The morning after the 911 fiasco, the escalation was immediate. At 9:17 a.m., Patrice's Audi slithered past our cabin again, slower this time, a reconnaissance crawl. She was checking if the police had hauled Evelyn away. She hoped fear would do what her fake authority couldn't. Evelyn pulled up an email sent to the entire HOA board by Patrice, subject line in all caps. Unauthorized occupant remains on property. Urgent action required. It was a masterpiece of delusion. Patrice claimed Evelyn had verbally threatened her, refused mandatory inspections, and evaded rule enforcement. Attached was a blurry screenshot of Evelyn jogging, captioned with a red arrow and the word loitering in Comic Sans again. She's serious, Evelyn murmured. And the more she loses face, the more dangerous she becomes. By noon, we got an email from the HOA treasurer, Kevin, an anxious man who treated accounting spreadsheets like sacred texts. It announced a special session to review possible violations. You want me to come with you? I asked. No. Evelyn shook her head. Let her dig. I waited in the truck while Evelyn walked into the clubhouse, that sterile, beige building that always reminded me of a dentist's office. Even from the parking lot, I could hear Patrice's voice leaking through the thin walls. She refuses to comply. We cannot allow instability. Then Evelyn's voice, calm and cutting, floated through the air. If I may, she began. Not only am I married to the deed owner, but I'm also formally listed as co-executive on the LLC that holds the property. And, though I dislike bringing this up, I'm also the deputy director of our state's law enforcement division. The silence that followed wasn't respectful. It was terrified. Patrice, of course, chose the absolute worst moment to double down. You're mocking our authority, she shrieked. Evelyn's voice turned sharp enough to shave the paint off the walls. Patrice, the only reason this hasn't gone legal is because I assumed you were capable of stopping before you embarrass yourself further. But you've attempted to weaponize legal processes to remove a lawfully present resident based on your personal bias. She emerged 20 minutes later. How'd it go? I asked. They're afraid of her, Evelyn exhaled. Too afraid to vote. They postponed the issue. They're giving her rope. Later that evening, the escalation crossed the line from petty to criminal. Someone anonymous reported our cabin as an illegal rental property to the insurance company. Then came the county zoning request for a septic inspection due to a noise complaint. Patrice wasn't throwing pebbles. She was throwing bricks. Then, we returned from dinner to find the front door open. Just a hairline crack, but intentional. Nothing was stolen, but a framed photo of us was face down, and the drawer where Evelyn kept her off-duty ID was pulled halfway open. It was a message. Evelyn pulled out her phone. Her voice was cold steel. Activate incident report. Code red. Intrusion with civil escalation suspected. Secure location immediately. She turned to me. She crossed the line. The next morning, retaliation arrived in the form of a drone. A small black quadcopter hovered outside our second-floor window, staring at us with its tiny, blinking red eye. "She's baiting us," Evelyn said, watching the footage from the break-in on her laptop. "She wants an emotional reaction so she can use it to justify another call." Evelyn calmly forwarded the home intrusion footage to 3 different oversight boards, then made a surgical phone call. "Yes, I'd like to open a formal investigation into unauthorized access and harassment by a private HOA member using stolen emergency credentials." It turned out Patrice had used a restricted access master key, the kind HOAs are supposed to safeguard like gold, to get into our house. An hour later, Patrice appeared again, bringing that terrified young lawyer, Stephen. She strutted onto the porch, thrusting her cease and desist letter forward. "This is her," Patrice declared to Stephen. "The woman refusing inspection, threatening leadership. Tell her the consequences." Stephen began his rehearsed speech. "Ma'am, I'm Stephen, representing the HOA's advisory team." Evelyn lifted one hand barely an inch. Stephen froze mid-sentence. "Stephen, let me stop you right there. Do you know who I am?" She didn't wait for him to answer. "I am Deputy Director Evelyn Carver. And whether you realize it or not, you are about 30 seconds from becoming a footnote in a disciplinary report." Stephen's eyes widened so far, I thought they might roll off the porch. He instantly backed away. But Patrice, bless her heart, doubled down. "Your position is irrelevant. She is a threat to the integrity of this neighborhood." "A threat, Patrice?" Evelyn tapped her phone, and the security footage played instantly. The drone hovering, the door ajar, the earlier clips of Patrice measuring our trash. "The only person creating danger here is the one stalking residents, breaking into homes, and flying drones outside bedroom windows." Patrice sputtered, incapable of processing the evidence. "Give me the drone controller," Evelyn said. Patrice's face went a fascinating shade of gray. Her hands trembled as she slowly produced the black controller from her massive purse. Evelyn took it, flipped the switch, and powered it down with the finality of a guillotine dropping. "Unauthorized surveillance device neutralized," she said softly. Patrice, defeated, grabbed Stephen and dragged him back to her Audi, muttering about community safety protocols. But the storm wasn't done. "Kasem evening, te phong dao dup va đánh giá luật pháp tiểu bang, stated in laws division, azit." 2 SUVs, unmarked, quiet. These were the people who showed up to dismantle corruption. "Deputy Director Carver," the tall one said, "we're initiating a formal inquiry into allegations of community leadership abuse, false legal filings, and misuse of emergency service protocols." I'd never seen Evelyn smile like that. It wasn't smug. It was pure, cold, justified certainty. "Of course," she said. "We'll cooperate fully." The news spread like wildfire. Patrice was officially suspended. But she didn't stop. She went feral. She started attacking other neighbors. Vince the accountant, with fabricated financial crime accusations, trying to spread chaos and isolate us. Evelyn knew the time for quiet documentation was over. She called a meeting, not an HOA meeting, but a gathering at the old boat dock, just neighbors. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She simply laid out the facts. The break-in, the drone, the false 911 call, the attack on Vince. "It's not enough to remove someone from power," she said. "We have to replace them with a system that won't become the same thing. This community needs guardians, not enforcers." The community rallied. They didn't just vote Patrice out. They voted to dismantle the entire HOA leadership structure and rebuild it with term limits, transparency, and legal oversight. Patrice, in her final act of delusion, tried to start a new HOA 20 minutes away under a modified name, Cassandra Rhine. Evelyn, without a word, filed an injunction request. She didn't try to destroy the new HOA. She simply asked the state to review the application under fraud prevention protocols tied to her misconduct at Oak Haven Ridge. The system Evelyn had helped build finally did the work for her. A statewide advisory was issued. Anyone found guilty of abuse of power in neighborhood governance will be flagged for review under any subsequent leadership filings. Patrice's new application was frozen. Months later, we received the final word. A letter from the State Licensing Commission. Evelyn opened it, read it, and smiled the softest smile I'd ever seen. It declared officially and permanently that Patrice Dubois, under any legal variation of her name, was banned forever from holding any position of authority in any HOA, co-op, or community compliance team statewide. I never thought I'd see a system actually change. People like Patrice don't just abuse power, Evelyn whispered to me on the dock that night. They reveal the cracks where abuse grows. And we close the cracks. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely safe. Not because Patrice was gone, but because Evelyn had rebuilt something stronger than fear. She had rebuilt trust. The lake was quiet, and the only sound were the crickets and the soft creak of the dock beneath our feet. My wife reminded me, and everyone around her, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand your ground with calm certainty. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, or any tyrant in your life who confused a clipboard with actual authority, I need to hear your story. Did you fight back? Did a system work for you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey to justice, don't forget to subscribe.